Tasmania, the island at the end of the world. Wild, remote, ancient. Forests that have stood for thousands of years. Coastlines that see more Antarctic wind than human footfall. A place so untouched that a third of it is protected as World Heritage Wilderness. Peaceful, pristine, isolated. But isolation has a way of preserving things, not just forests and coastlines. Secrets. Creatures. Places that don't appear on hiking maps. Stories that locals know better than to repeat too loudly. Today, 8 stories from the island that Australia tends to forget about, until it can't. Officially, the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine, went extinct in 1936. The last known individual passed away in Hobart Zoo on September 7th of that year. The species was declared extinct. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Since 1936, there have been over 3,500 reported sightings of thylacines across Tasmania. Not a handful, not a dozen. 3,500 individual reports from farmers, park rangers, hikers, scientists, and ordinary people who had no reason to fabricate what they saw. A striped, dog-like animal with a stiff tail and a jaw that opened wider than any known species, moving through the bush, vanishing into the undergrowth. In 2016, a thermal camera set up in the Tasmanian wilderness captured footage of an unidentified animal. Biologists who reviewed the footage could not make a definitive identification. In 2022, the Australian government quietly funded a scientific search for living thylacines in remote Tasmania. They didn't announce it loudly. The search found no confirmed evidence. It also found no confirmed absence. The Tasmanian wilderness covers millions of acres of terrain so dense and remote that large sections have never been walked by a European. If something wanted to stay hidden there, it could. For decades. Possibly longer. Port Arthur on the Tasman Peninsula is one of Australia's most visited historic sites. A sprawling convict settlement established in 1830, now partially ruined, partially preserved, sitting on a dramatic coastline of extraordinary beauty. Over 300,000 visitors come each year. They walk the grounds, photograph the ruins, take the ghost tour after dark. What most of them don't realize is that they're walking over an almost entirely unexcavated site. The visible ruins represent a fraction of what Port Arthur actually was. Underground, beneath the lawns and pathways, lie the foundations of buildings that have never been archaeologically examined. Storage facilities, passageways, infrastructure that connected the settlement's various functions in ways that aren't fully understood from the surface records alone. During routine groundwork in the 1990s, workers uncovered a series of underground passages that weren't on any existing plans of the site. The passages were documented, then sealed. The full extent of what lies beneath Port Arthur has never been publicly detailed. Archaeologists who have studied the site estimate that a complete excavation would take decades. The funding has never been allocated. The ground holds its secrets intact. The Tarkine is the largest temperate rainforest in the southern hemisphere. Over 400,000 hectares of ancient wilderness in Tasmania's northwest. Trees that were old when Rome was young. River systems that have never been formally surveyed. Sections of terrain that have genuinely never been entered by any recorded human expedition. Aboriginal communities have lived in connection with this landscape for over 35,000 years. Their oral traditions describe creatures in the Tarkine that don't correspond to any species in the current zoological record. Not the thylacine. Something else. Something associated with the deep river systems and the oldest sections of the forest. European settlers in the 19th century recorded their own encounters with large, unidentified animals in the region. The descriptions don't match anything catalogued. In 2023, a research team conducting biodiversity surveys in a previously unvisited section of the Tarkine documented several species entirely new to science. Plant species, invertebrates. If new species are still being found in sections of the forest that have simply never been looked at, the question of what else might be there becomes considerably less theoretical. Sarah Island sits in Macquarie Harbour on Tasmania's west coast. It operated as a convict settlement from 1822 to 1833, considered even at the time to be the harshest posting in the entire British penal system. Surrounded by freezing water, flanked by impenetrable rainforest, it was designed to be inescapable. In 1834, a group of 10 convicts, led by a man named James Porter, seized a vessel being built in the island's shipyard, the brig Frederick, and sailed it out of Macquarie Harbour, past the notorious Hell's Gates entrance, out into the Southern Ocean, and eventually all the way to Chile. 10 men with minimal navigational equipment crossed some of the most dangerous ocean on Earth in a vessel they had partly built themselves. The escape is documented. It happened. What has never been satisfactorily explained is how they navigated, the route they took, the conditions they survived, the precision with which they crossed thousands of kilometers of open ocean. None of it corresponds to the navigational knowledge a group of convicts in 1834 should have possessed. Maritime historians have studied the voyage for decades. The gap between what they should have been capable of and what they actually achieved has never been fully closed. The Blue Tier is a plateau in northeast Tasmania. Dense forest, granite outcrops, remnants of a 19th century tin mining community, now almost entirely reclaimed by the bush. Ruined machinery, collapsed shafts. A landscape in the process of being slowly swallowed. Locals in the surrounding communities have for generations described the same phenomenon. A sound, low, rhythmic, coming from no identifiable direction. Not wind, not wildlife. Something that seems to emanate from the ground itself. Geologists who have studied the area attribute it to the interaction of wind with the granite formations and the abandoned mine shafts, essentially the same acoustic principle that produces sound from a bottle when you blow across the opening, but on a geological scale. That explanation covers the mechanism. It doesn't cover why the sound changes, why on certain nights it deepens, why in certain weather conditions it produces what multiple independent witnesses have described as something close to a recognizable pattern. The Blue Tier sounds have been recorded. The recordings exist. Acoustic analysts have examined them and reached no consensus on what is producing the variation. Lake Timk sits in the Central Highlands of Tasmania. What makes it unusual is simple. It disappears. Not in a drought, not gradually. Periodically, and with no consistent trigger, the lake drains completely. Thousands of megaliters of water vanishing into the ground over a period of days. Then, weeks or months later, it refills. From below. The water returns through the lake bed. Hydrologists have studied this for decades. The working theory involves a subterranean karst system, a network of limestone caves and passages beneath the lake that acts as both drain and reservoir. The theory is plausible. The actual subterranean system has never been mapped. No one has been able to determine where the water goes when it drains, how far it travels underground, or what the full extent of the cave network beneath the Central Highlands actually is. Tasmania sits on some of the oldest and most complex geology on Earth. The cave systems beneath its highlands are, in places, genuinely unknown. The lake fills and empties on a schedule that answers to nothing on the surface. Whatever it answers to is underground, unmapped and unstudied. Hobart is Australia's second oldest city. Founded in 1804, Its colonial infrastructure was built largely by convict labor over the following decades. What that infrastructure included, in addition to the visible buildings, roads, and wharves, was an underground network that has never been fully documented. The tunnels beneath Hobart's CBD connect several of the city's oldest buildings. Some sections are known and occasionally accessible for heritage tours. Others have been sealed for over a century. During construction work on various Hobart buildings over the past 50 years, workers have repeatedly broken through into passages that weren't on any plans, sections of tunnel that connect buildings with no obvious reason to be connected, leading to chambers with no recorded purpose. The most persistent legend involves a tunnel running from the old Hobart jail directly to the waterfront, a passage used to move convicts from arriving ships directly into the prison system without surfacing in the city. No complete record of this tunnel exists. Sections of it have been found. Where it begins and ends and what else branches off it remains unknown. Off Tasmania's remote southwest coast, in one of the least accessed stretches of ocean in the world, fishermen and coastal residents have for decades reported the same phenomenon. A light, moving below the surface of the water. Not a reflection, not bioluminescence, which produces diffuse, soft illumination. Something focused, something that moves with apparent direction and purpose through water that is hundreds of meters deep. The reports go back to the 1950s. They come from people who have spent their lives on that water. Commercial fishermen, abalone divers, coastal rangers, people with no interest in fabricating unusual sightings and every professional reason not to. The descriptions are consistent across decades and across people who have never been in contact with each other. A light, moving, deep, deliberate. Tasmania's southwest coast sits above one of the least explored sections of the southern ocean floor. The underwater topography in the region is incompletely mapped. What natural phenomenon could produce a focused, moving light source at significant depth in that location has never been explained. The reports keep coming. The water keeps its answer. 8 stories. 8 places on the map of a single island. The wilderness is still there. The ruins of Port Arthur still stand. Lake Timk still fills and empties on its own schedule. The tunnels beneath Hobart are still sealed. The southwest coast still produces its light. Tasmania is the island at the end of the world. It turns out, that's not just a description of its location. It's a description of how much of it remains beyond the reach of any explanation we currently have.